should be speaking to the whole campus. What I'm arguing for, I'll get to the point. Headmasters tend to go all around tangents. I enjoy my own voice. I'm arguing for a unified education system whereby early childhood, primary, secondary and tertiary are unified. I'm suggesting that every secondary school, for example in Christchurch, is an extension of the ego of the principal and the board and the local community. It's horrible, I hate it. I'm saying that there should be no competition for education, for learning between schools. I'm saying that all children should be educated in a non-competitive environment. I'm suggesting that we need a unified curriculum whereby, for example, my language teachers, it's a national directive, teach languages, get a second language operating. My language teachers shouldn't be in secondary schools. My language teachers should be sitting with 2.5-year-olds in early childhood education. Because a 2.5-year-old can learn a language even as difficult as standard modern Chinese in a way a 13-year-old boy or girl can't. Makes sense to me. I'm saying that rather than have every school with a fantastic Aurora Centre, which then becomes an extension of the ego of the principal and the board, I'm saying one education centre such as that and shared by all the other schools all around. And I'm saying, why have we got an education system based upon an 8 to 3 day? Why don't we have education in shifts? It happens overseas. And why do we have a system whereby nobody's allowed to move outside the schools? With all the funny rules about little kids, for example, in ECE, have got to be protected from moving outside the school. Why can't we have educational villages? So for me, community is everything. I want old folks and pension and old folks homes. As we do in our society, we lock them in old folks' homes. We take our old people, we lock them away because they're old and crusty. Don't let them out in case they get seen. They smell of mothballs. I want those people to come into secondary schools and into primary schools and into early childhood centres. Makes sense to me. I want to involve the community in education. And yeah, I don't have a problem about them being registered or not registered. I think it's kind of cool if an old person shares their experience. And so for me, folk, let's get ourselves moving. That if we're wanting to make our society the best society in the world, we've got to start thinking about the whole village educating a child, which means you guys, it means older folk, it means people who left school before they were 15, it means the whole darn lot. And to achieve that, let's start forgetting about competition between schools. Call them a sports paddock, don't get me wrong, I'm happy with that, but not educated. Done. And anti-human, quite frankly. There you go. Have I offended anybody?
That was it.
So hopefully we can get through the rest of the questions and you'll still have something to say.
I'll probably fall asleep now. I've done the dash, folk.
Tony?
Yeah, look, I'll just pick up on Amy's point. I've always thought community is about, you'll get out of it what you put into it. And when we're talking to people about, joining the Defence Force in a reserve service capacity, always saying to them, it's not about what you get paid and the benefits and all that. You're joining for the wrong reasons if you're joining for that. It's about giving back to your community through service in the Defence Force. And there's some really positive benefits out of that, that we will give you world-class training and world-class experiences, which will make you a stronger citizen. And that when you take the time to leave the Defence Force, you'll continue to use those skills in growing your community. So, for me, it's not about signing people up, but it's signing people up for the right reasons, getting them involved, and then they can contribute through the Defence Force and then bring those skills back to the community once they decide to move on. And particularly in reserve service, because one day you're in uniform, the next day you're in your civilian capacity, and you're out and about in your community, and you can still continue to feel.
Okay, I'm just going to ask, what inspired all of you to get into your respective field or role in the community? So what led you to here? Maybe just in a short brief, 2 minutes.
Well, I'll start. For me, I was a lawyer, and I didn't like, frankly, a lot of where the law was taking the outcomes was, the issues that I was looking at. So I thought, well, I can sit here and be unhappy with that, or I can try and change it. So when the opportunity came up to be on the side of the equation that got to input into it rather than just react to what came out from Wellington, I guess I wanted to take that opportunity. And I get to do a lot of what I did as a lawyer, and I don't send my clients bills, which is lovely. There you go. That was me in 2 words, 2 sentences.
Very good.
I'll go. So I went to high school in Christchurch, I went to university in Christchurch, and I thought I was leaving as soon as I could possibly get out after all of that, and then we had some earthquakes, and I went, actually, I'm quite invested in the city. I want to stay here, and I want to do what's sort of the area that I see as sort of most at risk, and sort of in my view, it was the fact that young people were leaving because there wasn't enough for them to say it's worth staying in Christchurch. I believe that we live in the most sort of exciting and the place full of potential, but we need to make sure that there's still a reason for young people and for students to stay here. And so sort of from that I went, oh my God, I need to find a job. I don't want to be a lawyer. I've got a law degree. What am I going to do? And I decided that running for UCSA president was a good idea, and so did that. And then it sort of, ironically, I guess this year I started thinking about what I wanted to do for next year, because obviously it's a one-year term, and decided that the point was that I'm very, very lucky to have the best job in terms of the ability to try and make sure that young people and students are represented in a changing institution and within a wider sense in Christchurch, and so sort of that's why I'm sort of doing what I am now and why I'd like to keep doing it for a little bit longer.
For me, I'm a farm boy. Born and bred on the farm, loved farming, it's all I was ever going to do, and that was where I was getting in life. Reality hit once I actually got out farming, and particularly back in the 80s when farming wasn't going too great for my dad. I realised that he was never going to be able to give me the farm, be able to buy it, so I spent a bit of time sitting on the tractor thinking, what am I going to do with my life? And I kept coming back, I want to do something with people, I want a bit of excitement, a bit of action, a bit of help people, and it was just something inside me that says, hey, I want to work with people. And I kept coming back to policeman, and so that's where I went, chased it, got here. I must say the first mile I tried to run to get into the police force was the hardest I've ever done. Once I learned to take my farm boots off and put running shoes on, I got easier. So I've spent all my policing time in Christchurch, mostly what we call frontline, emergency response, that sort of stuff. Little bits of other things like big detection and a few inquiry work, that sort of thing. But my passion is out on the street, actually being where the action is, getting out, dealing with people and actually trying to help them. One of the big things I've found from doing it is that people often say, oh, you're seeing the bad side of society the whole time, but for every job you go to, whether it's someone's been assaulted and they're lying on the road and someone says, oh, that's really bad, what they don't see is 3, 4, 5 people have actually bothered to stop and comfort this person and support them and call the ambulance and prepared to stand up and say, no, I'll give evidence in court. And you keep on looking for those positives and they're always there to find, so that's good. What led me to my neighbourhood policing side at the moment? Just that constant grind. We were always going back to the same place for the domestics, always going back to that same problem area, that same sort of thing always happening, and it was just a churn. You were always doing the same thing, and then this neighbourhood policing came up, and it was an opportunity to actually say, hey, rather than just dealing with those surface problems, actually look back and realise that that's just the outcome. The problem's something deeper, and you have to look down and see what is that deep problem, and try and come up with strategies to fix that. And it's really exciting. It's great just being able to look at those deeper things and actually see things that are going to change and actually start seeing the effects of that.
What's really cool about your job, I think, Steve, is because you just have to worry about this one little square on the map.
Yep.
Half of Whanui Road, no.
From Manukau, just to put it in perspective,
Yeah.
the way neighbourhood policing teams work is that they're based on a set area, and ours runs from between Rickland Road and Blenheim Road from Manukau to Whanui. So it's not huge, 800 odd houses, a bit over 800 odd houses. But overseas research and that has said that you put a concentrated police force into that small area and you get the ability to actually learn who those people are, right? You get to learn their names, you get to learn their life story that's led to where they are now and the problems and things that are happening in their lives. more importantly, they get to know you, not as that blue uniform that races in when there's problems and races off again. They get to know you as a person, and you get to find out what the problems are and the underlying issues.
If you will, the classic Bobby on the beat, which I think is quite cool that we're bringing that back, which is a good initiative.
Steve, would you liken that to policing on a scale of what John was talking about in terms of education? Because essentially what you've described is a village in some ways.
Yep.
And so instead of pulling people out of there to police them or you intruding there, you're part of it.
Yep.
So it's rooted within it and it's getting to know people. And the village is all about relationships and sharing responsibility among yourselves.
And that's a lot of what we're doing. And to a degree, we've just been given the opportunity to be a catalyst for a lot of things. You know, we're not actually going out and doing these changes.
Right.
I liken it to the football. We find a problem, we work out, hey, what needs to be done, and then part of our thing is, who can we pass this football to as good as we can?
A wee bit like a link in the chain.
A little bit like I've done to Grace.
Yeah.
Grace came and saw me. She's wanting to get involved with JCI and in the community and that. We sat down, had a coffee. I've drunk lots of coffee since I've joined this job. But yeah, and in that discussion, it was, hey, community gardens came up, and she'll tell you.
And it all comes together, and before you know it, you're building it on the 19th of this month.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yep.
What other ways are we inspired into our lives?
It's a great question. I'm probably sitting here because of a 70 or so year old retired coal miner in Tennessee. One of the first job I took out of university was working for a senator, which would be sort of like Amy's job. And I was working in Washington, D.C., and on probably the second or third day on the job, my job was to work out problems that folks had in Tennessee with the federal government. So any kind of challenges that they had to get their tax refunds or various other things. And I got a phone call from a guy that I could barely understand on the phone. And so his wife got on, and what we worked out was basically he had been a coal miner his whole life, and he'd been a coal miner at the time when there was not a lot of regulation with regard to the air quality in the mine. So he had something called black lung, which is basically lung cancer. And the federal government and the states had worked out a deal with the coal miners and said, right, we recognize that you guys have had a bad deal. We'll pay you money on a per monthly basis that would equal your wages that should carry you on into your retirement and care for your family and so forth. Well, it turned out that this dude hadn't gotten his money for about 20 years. And he'd repeatedly kept trying to call various people, various senators, congressmen, whatnot. And he fortunately hit me on my early sort of stint in the job where I was an eager beaver, wanting to solve things. And so I started to root it out for him, and through a good bit of work and through some cooperation with the person at the Department of Labor, we figured out, and this was in the days before computers, that his folder had fallen in the file drawer down underneath the other files. And it had sat there for about 20 years. And so this other eager beaver at the Department of Labor found this guy's folder, so we worked it all out, and we ended up getting this guy a check for about a couple of $1 million, right? Because it was in back wages and interest and all this stuff. Of course, the senator took credit for it, not me, but that's okay. But what I realized was the reason why I was able to help try to solve that problem was rooted back in my university education. And I majored in English and history, which at the time seemed like either a prereq for law, or you'd go and teach English and history, which I did subsequently. It didn't seem like anything you would do to necessarily help some guy get money that he was owed for 20 years. And I guess what was never made clear to me in my university education was that, hey, your English and your history skills